Hello, I'm Alex Mansfield, the host of Manny Talks Shooting, and welcome to another episode. This is the shooting podcast where I talk to individuals all across the shooting industry. We'll talk competition, self-defense, concealed carry. If you like this content, check out our YouTube channel, Manny Talks Shooting. And without further ado, let's get to this episode. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Manny Talks Shooting, the shooting podcast where I talk to via the internet because I can and it's enjoyable. I guess at least that's what you say. I mean, you haven't told me that you don't enjoy it. So without further ado, let's plug the title sponsor of the podcast, Go Fast Don't Suck. For anyone who needs anything, you need to go to gofastdon'tsuck.net. Go get your dry fire target, some match jerseys, a banner if you're running a match because Bill has phenomenal pricing on those, or a meme on the internet. So go check them out on Instagram too. But anyway, gofastdon'tsuck.net, guys. Tell them Manny sent you. Move on with your day. But without further ado, let's get to the real meat and potatoes. The guest of the show, Mr. Charlie Perez, or AKA Charlie.
How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Doing great, Charlie. Thank you for coming on. It's been kind of last minute. Oh, and for anyone who cares, this is going to be your Christmas present. So this is recorded on 12/22 of 2020. So, but yeah,
Nice.
it's been a good one, Charlie. It's been in the making. You've been on my list for a while. I just have been hesitant, I guess, to reach out since you're so busy. But we'll make it happen. So.
Yeah, no problem. I always get a lot of requests, and I try to do as many podcasts as I can because it's always good to give back to the shooting community and have enjoyable banter between friends.
Exactly, and it just doesn't help. It doesn't hurt to hurt. It doesn't hurt your business, right? It's like get the name and the
Correct.
face out there. So it's all
Yeah.
good. So for the people, we'll burn through this quickly because probably most people know who you are. But who is Charlie Perez, and how did you get into shooting?
So the elevator pitch here is I started in 2008, and I jumped right in both feet, maybe head first. I don't know, but I basically was all in at the start, and I went from unclassified to GM in 18 months. And that was predominantly because I am an aggressive shooter and I like to shoot aggressively. And it came from the camp of I'll shoot fast and hopefully I'll get hits at some point. And that kind of helps promote in the classification system. I like to shoot a lot of local club matches, a lot of major matches. I do about 50 or 60 club matches a year and about 10 to 15 major matches a year. And it's still my quote unquote hobby. So I have a high participation level, but I wouldn't consider myself a quote unquote pro shooter that does this for a living. So it is still my hobby. I want it to be my hobby because this is my, relief from everyday work, and I wanted to keep it that way. So yeah.
But so you're a very active shooter, especially since you're a match director in Colorado. You're traveling all over. You dwarf most of your competition, literally and figuratively. But so that's really impressive. 18 months from unclassified to GM. I'm assuming probably in limited at first, or did you go the silly route and go in production first?
So it's kind of funny because I started out in production simply because I didn't know where I wanted to go, right? And I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on a new thing that I wasn't sure about. So I did what like every new shooter does. You go to your local gun store. What's the coolest thing of that day? Go get that thing, and then come back and then play the game. And I shot about a month of production, and then I was like, this game is too difficult to figure out in of itself without all these reloads. Thinking about, and I got to have this gun handling situation going on all the time. It's confusing in itself. So that's when I switched to limited. So I've predominantly shot limited for the vast majority of my shooting tenure. I have dabbled in other divisions, like I'm an open GM as well. So I got my open classification along the way. And just at the tail end of this year, I switched to open division full time. Basically because my poor old eyes just can't focus fast anymore for those iron sights. So that's where I'm going from now on.
So if like I say, so you were in 2008. So let me guess, was that production gun an XD?
It was an XDM.
Oh, hi.
Because
Yes.
because the M was the first. It was like the new hotness, the brand new gun. When I went into the gun store and I'm like, hey, that's got to be the best thing ever because it's brand new. So their marketing was perfect that way.
Right.
And it said match. So it was supposedly a quote unquote match barrel and a match gun. And hey, I'm going to do matches, so that's got to be the right one, right?
Yeah, and yeah, what they mean by match and what we mean by match, totally different things. But it's that
Yes,
marketing though. Like they catch you on these fancy words like or performance or pro, or it's like they hook you on whatever. It's like they want your money.
absolutely.
So yeah, you so that's yeah, so you're an open limited GM. Are you a GM in other divisions or just those two?
So technically, I'm an M in production simply because I'm in GM in the others, and I get enough classifiers in production to get classified in that, but no other divisions am I classified in.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much I did like through my in my own training, I've done training with carry optics guns, PCCs, a wide gamut of different guns because as a trainer, I want to be able to understand what my students are using from a tools perspective,
Hmm.
to be able to give guidance on, hey, here's what I found to be an optimal solution for this specific division. Because each division it's a different game in of itself, simply because there's different sighting systems, different power factors, right? More or less points, shooting aggression wise, how many points we need to capture, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely got to understand and tune your behaviors in matches to suit those specific divisions.
Which is great, and I understand your students probably appreciate it greatly because you know how to convey a message even for their platform type, like because you shoot 2011s primarily, so you're able to construe that to like a double single or a striker fired or even those silly 9mm rifles.
Yeah.
But so you say that this is a hobby, but you take it much more as than a hobby, in my opinion, because go out and spend your good weekends and PTO time from your job traveling to teach.
Yep.
What made you take that step from being I'm going to shoot all these matches to I'm going to shoot all these matches and go teach classes?
Well, so it's kind of double-sided. So one side of it is I knew that I had to hone for me to fix my skills faster and better. I needed to hone my skill of observation, right? Observing what skills are being done right or wrong or indifferent, right? And then provide a training solution around that. And for me to get better at that, I needed to start exercising that skill set of observing other people's performance and then looking at that, critically and being like, how can we optimize this? And then going from there. So one part of it was a perspective of I need to hone this skill of observing and formulating solutions. And the best way to do that is to train people, right? Go through class. And it started out as, shooting with buddies and we'll work together, pseudo practice buddies observing each other's stuff and that kind of thing, and a few like not paid for classes for people getting group training sessions, that kind of thing. And then it just evolved into it got to the point where there's more people wanting to train with me than my free time was. So I was like, hey, I should charge for this. And on the other side of the street, I was trying to make my training business side of it basically pay for my hobby, right? So, traveling to all these major matches and ammunition, like guns and gear and all that stuff, it's expensive, right? So,
Mhm.
one way to offset that is to, augment my budget by doing these training classes. So, I always kind of made it my goal to have my training business basically pay for the expenses that I incur in the hobby. So, it's kind of a net zero budget type of situation with my hobby. And it's some years I succeed, some years I don't, because there's always like the next thing or the next match or this or that that's a little bit more expensive than other things. But it definitely doing the training stuff allows me to have more participation than I would otherwise.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's pretty awesome because you're able to do that, and you're able to offset those costs because that's so big for a lot of people, right? Where you're like, oh, I got to pay for something somehow, but we'll figure out a way to make it worth our while instead of losing so much money because this is a giant money pit. If anyone hasn't realized that by now, if you're getting into the sport, learn this now. This is a money pit.
All hobbies cost money. That's the reality of it.
I mean,
I'm
it's
yet to find that free hobby.
right, yeah. Someone else, unless you have like a sugar daddy or sugar mama, you ain't getting a free hobby.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's for sure. And it's God, and you shoot a lot. Like you're probably shooting what, 2 matches a month or 3? on
So
average?
I'm really lucky from a major match perspective. In the middle of the summer, I'll probably end up doing maybe 2 or 3 matches in a month. But from a club match perspective, I'm really lucky here in Colorado. We have 12 different USPSA clubs along the Front Range that are within about an hour driving distance from my house any direction. So like every weekend day, there's a match. So I really kind of have to be judicious in which matches am I going to attend versus which I'm not, so I can go practice. Right. So I'm really lucky that way, and that's why my attendance of matches is so high compared to other people's. Is basically I have the opportunity to attend a lot of matches.
And you shoot indoor, like what? You have a Monday indoor match too?
So there's indoor matches, outdoor matches, all that kind of stuff. That's one of the fun things here is that when the weather gets cold and not so fun outside, then people start attending more of the indoor matches or vice versa. So yeah,
hmm Yeah, and it's
I
great.
always like to. Some people take off season, like during the winter time. They'll take time off because they don't like going outside and it's cold and your hands are frozen. And I will continue to shoot pretty much all year round because to me the skill set of being able to perform when you are cold and it's frozen outside and you got to make sure that everything works in those sub freezing temperatures and that kind of thing. And I really think that from a major match perspective, it gives me a leg up on people at the start of the season because
hmm
there's a lot of people coming out of quote unquote hibernation or on their off season into their first few major matches. And they're like, oh, I'm still coming up to speed. I'm not practiced up. But me continuing to stay engaged through the wintertime, I'm pretty much ready to go the whole time.
hmm Yeah. And like even for myself, like I took like an off season from October until probably mid-January is going to be my off season due to the fact that well, I'll get my new gun in January, which I'm really excited for. But besides that, is my first major is in mid-April, and in Michigan, it could still be snow on the ground, so I need to be prepared. So this winter, I'm actually going to go out and use my my club membership in the winter outside and shooting, just like you. So I was like, it's going to be interesting for the first couple months.
Yeah, just bring that snow shovel, buddy.
Yeah, no, that's what the truck is for. We just hook the plow up and be like, there we go.
There you go.
But yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, that's just how we had to schedule our first major match of the season. It was because of scheduling conflicts. It's like, well, it may have snow on the ground, but it could be worse.
Yep.
But yeah, so yeah, what year did you start teaching though? Like you would say you actually started charging for classes.
So that was in 2012.
Okay.
That's when I started like officially like put my shingle out as a trainer and starting wrangling classes and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been about 10 years since I've been
Yeah.
teaching people.
That's impressive because usually this sport turnaround is like every 3 years. So I mean the nice thing is you always can get people to be like, oh, let's take a Charlie class because they're new, they haven't heard of you yet, or they've just heard about you. So then it's kind of that recycling growth. But do you have times where you go back to the same area year after year?
So there is sometimes there's a year after year scenario in certain places. Other places it's like every other year, that kind of scenario. And I like from my training perspective, I do my training classes on an as needed basis. So I don't set a predetermined schedule and say, oh, I need to fill these weekends in these dates. What I do is I wait for people to ask me, hey, can you come out and do a class? We figure out a date and then I pop it in my schedule. So sometimes there are reoccurring training events like that, but other times, most of the time, it is like just, I want to say random places and locations that we basically figure out, hey, this works together on this specific weekend. Let's do it. That kind of situation.
Yep. And if anyone didn't know, as a listener, a requirement to take one of Charlie's classes is that you actually have to have read Charlie's book. The name escapes me at this very moment because it's very wordy. I think, if I remember right.
And it's called the Path of Focused Effort.
See, there you
Yeah.
go. See, it's a path of focused effort. See, I couldn't remember because I'm not focused. Obviously, I've had too much caffeine today, but I'm great. But so yes, you gotta read Charlie's book, and I'm assuming that's to cut out the base learning curve of everybody having kind of like equal playing ground of knowledge. I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, so I basically wrote that book because in my training classes, I kept finding that the discussion portion of the class, I always felt like I was leaving stuff out because we only have so much time. And we could spend the whole weekend just talking and discussing things, but we got to get to the pew part and actually exercising skill. So I found that I wanted to assemble a piece of content that I could give to students before the class that they could basically come up to speed and understand the context of what we're going to be going over. And my book isn't focused like deliberately on my class. It goes from start to finish and everything in between. So it can be used as a training tool outside of attending my class. But having my students read that book dramatically reduces the, oh, I didn't know about that, or this is completely new material to me, or like that type of discussion that ultimately ends up consuming time during the class. So it makes us more efficient while we're learning things in the class because we're all on the same wavelength as far as talking about specific skill sets or things or optimizations that we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, has there anything crossed your mind about writing a second book?
So yes and no. On one part of it, it's like skills are always evolving, but for me, I feel like the the main tool in that book, I go over. There's a chapter about how do you assess performance and compile a training program, right? And if people understand that skill set, there's no magic to any of the skills that we need to fix. You just need an effective training program and observation process to learn what you need to learn, right? And so, like, I get the same. It's kind of along the same context as my 2-day class is covers so many different variables and skills. And people are like, when are you going to do an advanced class? And these are from my existing students. And I'm like, hey, here's this laundry list of stuff that you still need to fix. So why do we need an advanced class, right? And there's really nothing quote unquote advanced around what we do. It's all fundamentals that are just deployed in a very effective manner.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like some people think that there's some super secret ninja stuff that you get the secret passcode and then you get into the dark layer of skills. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing like that. Like it's just doing things in a more efficient manner, right? Provides a more consistent performance and a performance that happens sooner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not faster, sooner. And I try to hammer that into my students' minds that if you start thinking about things from a perspective of don't do it faster, do it sooner, that helps us put our attention on the efficiency of the process, not the aggression, right? A lot of people think that, oh, to do this faster, I need to be more aggressive, more aggressive, more aggressive, more aggressive. And to a certain point, yes, we have to have a certain amount of hand speed to do things quickly, right? You need a certain amount of aggression. But at some point, you're going to inject too much aggression and it becomes less efficient, right? So it becomes more wasteful because you're moving appendages too far and you have too much pressure on certain areas. So it's important to think about it of I want to do things as soon as possible. And in order for me to do that, I need to do things as efficient as possible, like eliminating wasted movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you see, there's a lot of people you'll see either on Instagram or even at your local match where they're just like, "Why are you moving like that? Well, why are you doing the weird like you're bending over to get a mag out or something?" And it's they're just super inefficient, but they don't know either. They don't know any better. They don't know that they're doing it, or they're just trying to be super blazing fast, and they're just being gross motor skills at that point.
Yeah.
But I do remember from a lot of other content I've watched with you is the aggression of hand speed. If your hands are moving that fast, you're going to want to make yourself be more aggressive in everything you kind of do. Like if I remember
Yes.
right, the reload is very important to be aggressive on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, an easy way to think about it is that we are we're creatures of habit from a perspective of if we have slow lackadaisical hand speed, we're going to have slow lackadaisical foot speed,
Mhm.
right? It's actually really difficult to run super aggressively, but have slow hands during that same aggressive foot movement, right? Aggression breeds aggression. So, like a good example for me, if I need to exit a shooting position very aggressively and I have to do a reload at the same time, I'm 100% focused on my hand speed down to my next magazine. I'm going to slap for that magazine as hard as I can because I know that's going to translate into my feet moving as aggressively as they can. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. If and without that aggression, I mean, you find people just kind of walking through stages when they really need to be moving, and it's like,
Yep.
but or they're so worried about doing that reload to get like they're worried about missing the reload, so they move very slowly in their movements or leaving the position. So it's very inefficient. I guess I'd say it's inefficient in a way, but maybe it's efficiency for them. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, some people feel like, oh, I want to get this reload done before I get to the next position. And they basically slow their footwork down so that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So, so instead of speeding up their reload, their hand speed to make the reload mechanics happen sooner while having fast feet, like some people get chastised and say, "Hey, you got to that shooting position before your reload was done, and you ended up doing a standing reload." So the chastising part of that is you're doing a standing reload. So a lot of people's behavior is, oh, well, let me slow down the footwork so I'm not doing a standing reload. When
Mm-hmm.
ultimately the time penalty around that is the same versus if you ran aggressively to that position, but you're still getting your load done and you're in the position already. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it could have been the wrong spot to do the reload for the plan.
Yeah,
Sometimes people just pick the wrong spot, like, or they're hesitant on running dry on rounds, so they just pick a bad spot to reload. And but usually it's not the plan. It's usually the skills or the habits of the shooter, not necessarily the plan being a bad plan.
correct. Correct. We're creatures of habits,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Now, now you being the top, I'm assuming you are like everyone's trying to beat you at a local match, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Does that give you any pressure or does it boost your confidence to know that you're the top guy that they're looking out to beat?
You know, when I first started, yes. When I first started and I first was like the carrot is I want to beat these other people because I want to be at the top of the list. Anymore, I really I make it me versus the stage. So the stage is my competitor, not
Mm-hmm.
the other people shooting the match. So and in that scenario, it doesn't matter who's attending the match other than me, because my competitor's already there. It's the stage, right? And there's been plenty of local matches that I've won against other people, but I lost against the stages. Does it make sense?
Oh yeah, because
So
yeah, that's your true opponent is to be efficient and perform optimally on every stage.
absolutely. So from that perspective, the stages are tough, right? It is, and I try to explain this in my classes that through my tenure of shooting, like I don't know how many stages I've shot through my tenure of this game. It's probably thousands at this point. But out of those thousands of stages, I can count on one hand how many times I got done with a stage run, and I could honestly say I could not do anything better in that run. So, I mean, from that perspective of, oh, we're going to play this game and I'm going to do everything perfect, the percentage of at bats you need for that to happen is ton, a ton. Like it's in the point oh something percent is when you're going to be successful in that manner. So that's what I mean about the stages are very difficult in that perspective. Is that no matter like the structure or construction of the stage could be physically very easy, or maybe even the shooting challenges are very easy, but even an easy constructed stage or shooting challenge stage can be very difficult to win against
Mm-hmm.
that specific stage, right? And not that's the thing, that's what keeps me going and keeps the fire burning for me is that there's always the next stage for me to compete against. And that's for and from that perspective, and I use that same mentality no matter where I'm competing. It could be the nationals, it could be a club match. And that's why I always like to say to my students that if you want to see Charlie Perez's national championship performance, come watch me shoot a stage at any match because that's the level of effort I'm putting into every single stage run that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another like mental trickery that people have is there's a lot of people that perform very solidly at local levels, and then they go to their major match and they're mentally flipped out because now this match is something more important than it really is. Right?
Hmm.
It's artificially inflated. Oh, I spent all this money to get here. I've been practicing all month to do this match really good. And all of those things really translate to just distractions, right? That erode at your consistency of performance.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as soon as everyone they hype themselves up, oh, I'm at nationals, oh, I'm at an area match, and it seems they have these dumpster fires because they put too much outward pressure on themselves over nothing. It's just another stage, another match, you know. And I guess that's one thing that people really need to realize. Your local match, treat it like nationals. Nationals is just like a local match at that point.
Yep. Yep.
But Charlie, you seem very analytical. Well, you are analytical. Do you think you get that from your day job, or does that come up from like your upbringing that you've been you're analytical?
So that comes from my day job. So I mean, I'm basically my job is to solve problems every day, all day long. So I'm very like identify the issue, formulate a solution, deploy the solution. That's like every day. That's my life,
Mhm.
right? So and in order to do that, you need to be pretty analytical and understand the context of the whole situation, right? What's the magnitude of the issue, and what are all my options, right? So from that perspective, I've always been analytical in my approach to learning things or performing better or any of that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. And do you ever get to turn that brain off? Do you ever get to enjoy not having to like super analyze everything, or you can just like turn it off and just chill? Is that your downtime at home then?
Yeah, that's my downtime at home. Yep.
Yeah. And it's because you have cute, adorable dogs, right? That's the best part, right?
Yeah, I have wiener dogs. I have three wiener dogs. I love them.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love dogs? Even if you're a cat person, you have to love dogs, people. Like, come on. There's, like, I mean, I like cat. I'm a dog guy. I like cats. Cats don't like me because I'm allergic, and that's the worst part about it. Like, I hate it. But they're so cute. They want to. They love on you for like a minute, and they're like, "No, fuck off. I'm done with you." But yeah, so you have three adorable wiener dogs. Gosh, how old is the oldest one?
So the oldest one is 13, and then the two younger ones are both 3.
Oh
So
God, the geriatrics like, "Hey kid, leave me alone."
exactly. The oldest one always tries to raise up and try to play with the little ones, and then he's like, "No, I'm smoked out. You guys have fun on your own."
Yeah, exactly. That's always funny though. It's like I'm lucky enough my two dogs are like a year apart. So they're growing with each other. Although unfortunately my male's gonna be 4 years old this year. And it's like, damn it, that's a quarter of your life, dude. Like, stop getting old.
Yep.
But yeah. So, you a little bit ago you're talking about, that every stage is hard, for you because you want to perform to the optimal of the stage. Um, if anyone didn't know, you put a very well written article on the Brian Enos forums that are not dead, people. So go to the Brian Enos forums and look this up. Uh, but I guess we should talk about this first. Charlie, where'd the Charlie part come? Obviously, it's a funny game nick on your name, but what made you choose the panda with Charlie?
So the Charlie came like many years ago from actually when I was back in high school. It was just kind of a nickname that I came up with, and it just stuck through. Like to me, it's a not very common username that you can use for forums, right?
Hmm.
Instead of coming up with Charlie Perez dot 4362 or some weird number combination or random thing you're into that day. So that's where the Charlie thing came from, and I think it's just a fun play on the name Charlie.
Has anyone at a major match instead of calling you Charlie, they call you Charlie?
Yes, yes.
I think you should register for all your matches like that. Just don't even put your river. Be like, who's
Yep.
this Charlie guy? And that is the big guy. Like, bam.
Yep.
But as you said, we were talking about you wrote this really good article after nationals. It was like what, a month after nationals, so you had time to think about it. It wasn't like a hot take off of that. But so go ahead and tell the listeners like the synopsis, I guess, of this article or this forum post.
Yeah. So that I started a thread on the Brandinos forum, and like some people are fans of that forum, some are not. I think it's a great resource for a tremendous amount of information if you're willing to dig for it. But this specific thread was like my observation, anytime I go to any match, like I'm a match director myself,
Hmm.
so it's very hard for me to go to any match and not have my match director hat on to
Yep.
think about how could this be optimized? How could this match have been done better? That kind of thing. How do we service the customer, right? Because really, any match, all it is it's a product that you want people to buy, right? If you make the product too painful, then people aren't going to buy it, right? So the synopsis of this thread is I'm seeing a trend, and I've seen a trend where matches, and it could be local matches or major matches, and it just so happens to be several of the major matches I shot this year had like unreasonably un unexpectedly hard shot difficulty. Like it just doesn't make sense to have back to back to back to back to back shooting challenges that are like over the top. And when I say over the top, I'm not saying, oh, I could never make that shot or they're like gambling, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there's too much excessive shot difficulty in some of these matches where the customer base, and this is part of my match director brain, is that we need to tune the stage product to where the average customer can succeed at hitting the targets, right?
Hmm.
And the average customer is that C, B class shooter, right? So that C or B class skill set, we need to formulate shooting challenges that these people can most of the time hit the targets, right? And for some people, for some match directors, they're like, oh, this is our major match. It's extra important. So let's make the shots way harder, right? So we can challenge these grandmasters. Let's challenge these shooters by making the shooting challenges like way too too excessive in difficulty in a manner that you're testing the same thing, meaning difficult shots, not unreasonable shots, but difficult shots over and over and over and over and over, right? And for me, like if I go to the Nationals, I expect that the Nationals is going to have a testing of skills across the full breadth of the practical shooting spectrum, meaning you have hosey stuff, you have difficult stuff, you have one-handed stuff, you have shooting on the move, you have moving targets, you have all these different angles and skill sets that we need to test to determine who's the national champion, right?
Hmm.
Well, this past limited open nationals that I went to, there were many of the stages where they had difficult shots where there's whole arrays that are basically the exact same shot over and over and over and over and over. And it's like, well, what are we testing here? We're testing the same skill over and over. So this is the who can aim the best and press the trigger straight back national champion. If that makes sense.
Hmm.
So when I look at the results, so if you were to go, if anybody had to go to on the practice score and go look at the match results from either the limited or the production divisions, nobody shot the match clean. Nobody. Which to me is that's that is a red flag in of itself, right? There
Hmm.
wasn't that many stages where there's like 50 stages and okay, you get a mic here or there, right? There was 18 to 20 stages, and even the top shooters are racking up misses, right? And I shot on the super squad, and there's definitely people who are like, I have to shoot this stage at this pace of aggression, and I hope I have my hits, right?
Hmm.
So to me, now we're not playing a game of skill, we're playing a game of gambling, right? It's a game of chance at that point. Who gets lucky and hits the targets versus who has the skill to hit the targets at a competitive pace, right? So my like call to the like the masses is like, hey, let's make these shooting challenges reasonable, right? In a balanced manner, right? I'm not saying make everything at 2 yards and it's a hose fest all over the place. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, sure, we can test that 20, 30, 40 yard target. That's one here or there. Sure, that's viable. It can't be 6 or 8 or 9 of those same targets in the same stage because like what are we doing here? We're doing the exact same thing again and again and again and again. And like I said, it turns into a gambling situation versus a skill test situation. That
Oh,
makes sense?
oh yes, absolutely. And like even myself as a fellow match director, like I was part of the club that ran Area 5 in 2022. We got a lot of good feedback. Kind of like what you were saying, it's like it was a little too difficult through the whole match. Like unnecessary penalties essentially, and we thought it as a shooting challenge, but we had too many of the same kind of like what you're not bitching about, but complaining of, well, not I wouldn't say it's complaining. You are pointing out, I should say, because it's not bitching or complaining, but you're pointing out, and yeah, we had a lot of those. We had too many. So I think we're this year for 2023, we've dialed it back. I think we've tweaked it and tuned it so that 2023 will be more enjoyable, because it is no fun when who wants to come back and shoot a match where you got 20 penalties throughout the whole match because of hard cover out at 15 to 20 yards when it doesn't really need to be, or hard move, or like you said, you had to move at this fast pace of aggression at this pace instead of being able to hit the targets. You're just hoping that your shots are on target.
Yeah. And like, if we think about the people's enjoyment of the match, I'm yet to see anybody post match at dinner, driving away, you're talking to your buddies, say, man, that match was awesome. I had 20 mics.
Yeah, no one says that.
Those things don't go together, right? Because people correlate enjoyment in hitting the targets, right? And once again, I'm not pitching for, oh, we got to make it so easy that nobody ever gets any misses, because if the stages are designed properly, they should be pushing, they should allow customers, competitors, to push the boundaries of their skill set to get a faster stage time because they're pushing the boundaries of their skill set. And that's super generic for basically saying, hey, this target at 12 yards, a B class, a C class shooter could hit it all day long from a stationary position, but an AMGM shooter, they're going to decide how fast of a foot pace can I shoot that while shooting it on the move, right? And if that competitor makes the wrong decision, they try to move too fast while they're shooting on the move, they're going to have a miss, right? To me, that's a valid miss. It's not, oh, I come to this position, I got to shoot a 40-yard partial, right? That is it. That everybody is forced to make that very difficult shot that the average customer, I would say, is a gamble to hit it, right? We
Right.
shouldn't have we can have onesie twosies of those in a match. We can't have a ton of that stuff, right? Or unreasonable moving targets. That can, like, to me, it's, I don't know. Like, I like to always, like, as a match director, I'm always looking at the results post match on a per stage basis to see how many shooting penalties does this stage have. And over my years as a match director, if a stage has 50% or more of the competitors racking up misses, there's something off about that stage, right?
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
It could be too many partials, too much stuff at distance, too fast moving targets, whatever, right? It's too much. Whatever happened there, it was too much. Too much no shoots, too much hard cover, too much distance, whatever. And if you were to look at, there's certain stages out of the nationals, if you were to look at that percentage, there's some stages where it's like 80 or 90% of the people are racking up misses on it, right? To me, that's an unfortunate situation, because now we have this invalid shooting challenge in a nationals, which is used to determine who the champion is, right? There's a difference between, let's put some crazy stuff up in a club match and see what happens, versus, hey, let's go find out who the best shooter in the nation is, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's yeah, no one wants to just, I mean, I think I looked at Open Nationals results. Like the winner had like maybe 2 to 3 mics over, 21 stages. Very reasonable. For their, not too outrageous. They probably played, I wouldn't say played it safe, but they shot to their skill level and they, capitalized on it. But yeah, when you're talking about the B and C class shooter, that is like the heart of the sport. It's the people who come in, week out, come to all the matches, come to all your area matches, section matches. They're the ones paying the checkbook essentially. I mean, you'll get your GMs here and there, But yeah, so you got to tailor your product to be a shooting match of shooting challenges, not necessarily too over difficult or gimmicks. Because I mean, have you ever shot Area 3 before?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh yeah.
yeah, so you've known every circus match in the book until recently.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
can
and it's all about tuning the shooting challenges to be a product that's challenging yet enjoyable, right? Like if I have an average skill set shooter come up to my match and they walk up to a stage and they're like, "Oh man, I hope I survive this stage," I have failed. I failed as a match director because I have an invalid product versus my customer base.
Mhm. Well, and and your customers aren't going to come back to your product or your match if they didn't like it the year before. And everyone speaks with their wallet nowadays, right? What they buy, who they go visit, who they buy their magazines from or whatnot. Everyone has experiences, or they've talked to their buddy who's like, oh, have you been to this match before at this range? And they're like, yeah, it sucked. I'm never going back. And then you lose an extra customer there.
Yep.
But yes, so I agree with you. And your post is very well written, and everyone definitely should go read it and whatnot. Thanks everybody for stopping in the middle of this awesome episode with Mr. Charlie Perez, or Charlie, from Big Panda Performance. But let's go over the sponsors because we have to, and I want to, because without them, this is just a little more boring. So we've got the awesome sponsor of Go Fast Don't Suck. The banner behind me is made by Bill from Go Fast Don't Suck. So make sure you guys check him out. Oh, someone went berserk. Anyway, Go Fast Don't Suck, guys. He supports this podcast greatly and a lot of major matches. So go check out gofastdon'tsuck.net. Then we got to run over to huntershdgold.com. Check out Brian. Brian's fantastic. He's had a bunch of major matches every year. We can't thank him enough because he's always there for us and giving you awesome reasons to go to matches, and he gives it a great vendor atmosphere. Don't forget to run over to dominatedefense.com and use the promo code Manny Talks 10 for 10% off your Mach 1 speed belt combo order because you need it. It's the best belt. Going to last 4 to 5 times longer than any double alpha premium belt because that's just so much better. If you want a really cool 3D printed magnet for a very good price, go over to divtechshop.com. Use the code Manny Talks Shooting for 10% off your order. Tell Nathan I said hi and order a magnet because he's awesome and he's a small business trying to make it in the shooting industry. So go check them out. Speaking of another small business in the shooting industry, Laugh and Load, my friends Tony and Jackie over at the Pewtime Podcast and Laugh and Load, they have awesome merch. They are offering my t-shirts. I'm waiting for a t-shirt to proof to come in, but anyway, get yourself an official Manny Talk Shooting t-shirt. You can't say no because they're awesome, and go get an AF t-shirt. Go get us a Prime Division Open shirt because they're fantastic. We can also not forget about our friends Eric Steiner and Gianni Giordano over Range Panda, RPG squared or 2, whatever they want to call it. Anyway, go check them out. Making awesome products, case foam, lasering on cups, all your 3D printed accessories, CNC'd accessories for your press, and awesome pistol stands that you want to use to pimp out your awesome 2011s. Don't forget, you're going to run over to targetsusa.com because Jason Woods makes fantastic targetry. Hey, shut up, Ivy. And you are going to thank me later because it's the finest steel targetry on the planet. Just ask me, ask Steve Anderson, ask anybody who's got it because it's awesome. It's mobile, it's portable, it's fantastic, it's innovative, and it does whatever it needs to do. So targetsusa.com. Don't forget to also run over to timheronshooting.com to check out Tim's schedule. I'm wearing his t-shirt right now as I edit this video. Go check out timheronshooting.com. Go get on his schedule. Find a class near you or get in touch with him to host a class because you never know. Classes are filling up and you might need to get one in there. And we finally cannot forget Sheely Custom Gunworks because your Staccato or Prodigy needs a metal grip and you know where you got to go. Sheely Custom Gunworks or ccgunworks.com. So check them out, guys. Those are the sponsors of the podcast. I thank them greatly every time I look at this list to talk to them, talk to you about them. So anyways, guys, we're going to go on and finish this awesome conversation with Mr. Charlie Perez. I can't remember are you the Colorado section coordinator or somebody else have that job?
I am. So I'm the section coordinator.
Oh, so you got the extra hat. So it's a trainer, a match director, and the section coordinator.
Yes.
and you have a day job and you go shoot all these matches. It's like,
Heck yeah, all in.
are you a glutton for punishment or like?
Well, so I always like, so I'm a facilitator, meaning I try to, like, I attack my matches as a match director just the way I would attack my skill sets as a shooter, right? I want to optimize my skills as a match director, right? And that transitioned into other clubs saying, "Hey, you're being successful at this part or that part of your match. How do I do it? Tell me how to do it. Train me on how to do that stuff." And so that evolves into that section coordinator type of hat that I was wearing anyway, where all these clubs are coming to me around, "Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? How would I optimize this?" So, and that's really the job of the section coordinator, is to help facilitate clubs being successful in deploying their matches.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, and you obviously travel around to all your clubs. I mean, they're only about an hour. Most of them are about an hour away from you, so makes it
Yep.
very easy. But so do your club, your match directors, do they always reach out to you, or is it kind of you got to check on in on them?
It's both ways. Like some
Mhm.
clubs, and I like to, like, for each of the clubs that I go to, like if I see, like I said, I put that match director brain hat on, and I'm like, "Hey, this or that could be optimized." Like I'll send an email to the match director after the match and be like, "Hey, these are the things I've seen that you could possibly do different in the future, and here's a potential solution for that. Here's a way to, optimize that thing." And everybody kind of takes that feedback a little bit differently. Like some people take it of like, "Hey, you're poo-pooing my match, and I take offense to this because you're questioning my skill set." And I don't ever mean any of the feedback in that manner. I'm truly like, "Hey, let me help you help yourself, so the next time it's easier for you and your customers enjoy your product better."
Mhm. And how often do you have like Colorado, section meetings?
So we've been doing them on a quarterly basis, but it really comes down to what things are happening in the section. Like we're a pretty involved section, so like we have our own section website, and we coordinate RO classes and CRO classes. We have a section qualifier series that we use to deploy the national slots, that kind of stuff. And like we went, like the last major stuff that we really went through is we have a safety program that all the clubs use. So we had to like revamp that whole safety program to make sure that all the clubs are using the exact same process. That way a new shooter could go to any of the clubs and get the same consistent training, safety training from that club. And then we give them what we call a yellow card. It's basically their little safety card. So that new shooter could go to any other club in the section and say, "Hey, even though I'm new, I went to the safety course at this other club. Here's my card." So that's a good way that makes it easy for match directors to know, "Hey, do I need to do a safety class for this guy versus that guy?" That kind of situation. But it really, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes from a keeping sections and matches running, that I think that by design it should be behind the scenes,
Mhm.
right? Like I never try to pound my chest and be like, "Rah rah, look at me, look what I'm doing all these things for the section." Because if we're all doing our job properly, it should look like this stuff just magically happens.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I agree. I don't. Yeah, because they like to know they're doing a good job, and you don't want to. No one ever wants to be told they're not doing a good job in public. They like those private criticisms, privately, so then they can evolve that way if you have to make a comment.
Yeah.
And I do like that safety course idea. I mean, there are some clubs in our section that, you have to take a safety course from their club if you're unclassified in
Mhm.
USPSA. So then they're like, okay, you got to take this class, but but some clubs don't, and you just get stuck with the match director on their squad so they can watch you and be safe. But yeah, I like that idea, especially with it being a consistent safety product. So
Yeah.
that's also a big thing, because then you have probably a higher level of safety and probably a lot less DQs from your newer shooters.
Yep. And we also have a section DQ policy, meaning that if a competitor gets three DQs within a calendar year, they have to go through a retraining process, right? So we track all the DQs, and then like, I'm the unfortunate person that has to reach out to the person that gets the three DQs and be like, "Hey, We got to get you through this training stuff again, understand the context of why you're DQing, that kind of situation. And that way it just makes everybody who engages in our section feel safer altogether because we're all on the same page and we're all held accountable, right? So you can't have a situation where one guy DQs a bunch at one club and he's kicked out of that club because he's unsafe, and then he just goes to the next club and continues that unsafe behavior, right? So just stuff like that we all work really hard on making sure that we're providing fun, fair, and safe competitions in our section. And if like our section website, like all this DQ policy stuff, the safety stuff, all that stuff is on our section website, and you can get to that at ECOUSPSA.com. ECO stands for Eastern Colorado, so ECOUSPSA.com. Check it out. Poach what you need to poach if you're a match director. Pull down what you got to do, and if you have questions, reach out to me. Like, I'm here to help people out.
So you say you're Eastern Colorado. So is there Western Colorado then too?
There is a Western. So it's basically divided by the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, okay.
East and West. Yep.
Now, do you both have section matches, or you just do the state championship then?
So we've been doing, so there's one state championship that we basically share. So every other year we switch sides, right? So this year coming up in 2023, this is the Eastern side to get it. And then next year it'll be the Western side that gets it.
That's pretty cool. So then I'm assuming then the Eastern section has to decide which club's going to host it and who's going to be the match director kind of thing. And
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. And then I'm assuming when it's your year, you're involved. And then when it's the Western side, you're not. You're still involved, but not necessarily on a hands-on or more eyes-on process.
Correct.
That's pretty cool. Well, Charlie, we need to get to some of these listener questions. They're pretty good, actually. These people, they did actually send some good questions, and more conversations will branch off of those questions, which I love that when it kind of just flows in it. It's natural. But so like you said earlier, you're switching to open full time with your chaos, your wonderful chaos. I know the answer to this, but the person wants to know: do you use a thumb rest, and why or why not?
So I do not use a thumb rest, and I have tested thumb rests. So that's one thing that I'm a fiddler, so I've tried everything. So I try all these different tools and functions and widgets, and to me, like, I want to maximize performance. If there's going to be a widget that's going to maximize performance, it's going to be on my stuff, right? So if something's not on my stuff, it's not on there because there's a reason. So the main reason why I prefer not to use thumb rest is that it puts an abnormal pressure on one side of the gun that doesn't exist on the other side of the gun, right? So even if you had an even amount of grip pressure on both hands with your thumb on the thumb rest, it's going to make the sights or the dot track to the direction of where the thumb rest is. So like most people are right-handed shooters, meaning the thumb rests on the left side of the gun. Most people, when they grip hard on the gun, they're going to put pressure into that thumb rest, and it's going to make the dot track up into the left. Okay, so you basically are inducing this abnormal tracking direction of the dot. Like, we have to shoot aggressively. If we're shooting a dot, we should be shooting while the dot is still streaking in the glass. And if we add additional strange directions of the dot streak, it makes that process all that much harder, right? So I want to make the process as easy and predictable as possible. So I'm not going to use a thumb rest in that manner.
And yeah, you do fiddle. I remember watching you talk about a lot of different posts about your limited gun with your mag wells and, like which one fits your hands best, because you have honking hands. I'm assuming what, double XL gloves?
Yep.
So like, there's nothing that I don't even think a thumb rest would honestly fit your hands, even on the gun, to be honest. Like, you'd be hanging off the front of it no matter what. So it's more like a knuckle rest, right? But yeah, so that's And I've heard you talk about that on the shows. Yeah, so it's the thumb rest that it doesn't necessarily, it's good or bad. Like, some people love it as a prop, right? They love to be able to, the gun's kind of prop, so you can get the gun under the gun a little bit, but that undue pressure, the abnormal pressure of with the dot, it's just it's not consistent, or could be not consistent. But then there's some people who love them.
I mean, the other negative thing that I found on it is, okay, so let's we grip the gun in a way that minimizes that up and to the left movement. If you have pressure, like if we think about our hands, they're really like rubber bands, right? They're malleable and they're muscular, meaning muscles. They're like they compress and they load and they unload, they load and they unload, and when they unload, that usually translates to the muzzle dipping as the slide snaps forward, right? So if we create a scenario like a lot of people then put a thumb rest on the side of the gun, that promotes not canting your wrist. So if the purpose of canting our wrist is to eliminate it as a movement, so it's no longer a hinge, right? It's a stationary thing. But if we have a thumb rest that promotes a straight wrist, now this wrist can move, right?
Mhm.
And any movement there is going to translate to like opposing movement. So the gun comes back and recoil, and it comes back forward, and you end up in this muzzle dip scenario. And like a lot of people, they're like, I don't believe it. It feels better and that kind of stuff. But I tell people, slow motion video your gun with your thumb on a thumb rest, shooting from a profile perspective, and you look at that frame by frame as the slide snaps back forward versus your thumb is under the thumb rest, so you can't have that leverage on that side of the gun, and do the exact same situation video, and you're almost always going to have less muzzle dip as the slide snaps forward. And muzzle dip, just like the coming up into the left, that translates to more dot movement. Okay. I want that dot to move the least amount in the most predictable path.
Well, that's why it's frame mounted, right? It's on a frame, so it shouldn't. It's not like a carry optics gun where it's going on the slide. It's supposed to be stationary, right there where you put it. So yeah, there's that. This is a good question. My buddy, best friend in the world, he knows who he is. He asked, "What advice do you have for bigger, taller, and or heavier guys moving around a stage?"
So bigger and heavier guys, like I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", right? I'm chubby in all the right places, right? So I think it really comes down to making sure that you're leveraging a stance that provides mobility, right? There's a lot of people that like to stand in positions, shooting positions, with pretty straight knees, which I kind of consider like you could stand there all day and not have much of any leg muscle fatigue. That is a structure, like our bodies are designed to do that because our bodies want to be efficient in our consumption of calories and use of muscle. But that is actually a super poor place to be from a mechanics and an aggressive exiting position, entering position scenario. Like if we're standing in a shooting position properly, it should be 100% leg muscle holding us there, meaning you can't stand there for a long time. Okay. Now, for some people, they're opposed to bending their knees and getting into that slightly crouched stance where it's muscles because it is uncomfortable, right? And they feel like, oh, I can't maintain the stance for very long, so I want to get into a comfortable stance. Well, a comfortable stance almost always translates to shuffling around as you get out of the position because we have to change weight distribution, our center of gravity, and all that kind of stuff comes into play, right? So if we think about economy of movement, every step, so I like to put, kind of generic numbers around things. And every time we lift a foot and put a foot down, it's at least a half a second. Okay. So if you video like everybody's got video footage of their runs, if your feet are in the video, right, look at your feet. How noisy, meaning steps, how many steps are you taking in a single shooting position? Because each one of those steps is worth a half a second. Who wants a free half a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds in a stage? Ooh, I do.
Oh yeah, everybody, right?
I'm gonna purposefully place my feet in my stance in shooting positions that mitigate the need to take these shuffle steps. Okay, so regardless of your size, that's a requirement. That's part of the efficiency that I was talking about. I want to do stuff sooner and not needing to take extra steps, and I can just push 1 foot to exit a position. that gets me out of the position sooner, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even that goes to like your stage plan or your memorization or your programming of where you got to go on a stage, what spot you're going to look at on the ground to make sure to optimize that your feet are in the
Absolutely.
right spot, so you don't have to do that shuffle step of around this wall or
Yeah. So a good thing, like a concept that I've mentioned in my classes is that people need to start grading or scoring their footwork as if it was a target, meaning each foot is worth an alpha, 5 points, right? You want 2 alpha in footwork in every shooting position, right? And
Mhm.
if you have to start taking shuffle steps and drop steps when you don't need it, those are points down. Like there's a lot of people that have time wise, like hit factor time wise, they have mics and no shoots worth of poor footwork and shooting positions, right? Because all this shuffling of feet takes time, right? And time is a component of hit factor, right? It's just how many points you're doing per second. But that's a very important thing that people need to start looking at is they think about their score is only the holes in the targets. No, that's half your score. The other half of your score is your footwork, right? Because if you have poor footwork, that's going to be score hit factor wise just as bad or important as hitting the targets, right? So we need to hit the footwork and we got to hit the targets.
Yeah, you got to be able to traverse the stage. And then
Absolutely.
if you can't traverse the stage without all those issues, it's you got some problems. Probably first rule number 1 is make sure you can hit all the targets. Rule number 2 is have efficient footwork.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think so. This next question I think was from a former student of yours. I'm not for sure, but it seems like how they asked the question, it probably is. What are your thoughts on alcohol consumption the night before a match or between shooting days?
Well, everybody has different, so I'm a proponent of you do you, right?
Yeah.
So if some people are hyper excited and they need to be chilled out, I can see them, consuming some alcoholic beverages to chill themselves out. But ultimately, like you probably don't want to do stuff like most of the time we're shooting matches in summer type of weather, right? Which means we need to be hydrated, right? And alcohol is a dehydrator, right? So I'm not going to consume alcohol before before I attend a match or in the middle of a match, that kind of situation day to day, just because I don't want to like risk being dehydrated, that perspective. Because if we get dehydrated, like the first thing to go actually is our vision, right? So if we get dehydrated, we our focal speed dramatically slows down, right? So we got to be careful around, drinking too many barley pops between days of shooting.
Yeah. Yeah, and that definitely can mess people up, deciding to go get blackout. Well, I wouldn't say blackout drunk, but they decide to get a little too much for themselves or their weight class, and they decide to have a rough morning. And there's
Yep.
no amount of barbecue breakfast burritos that will get you out of that funk.
This
Yeah,
game's hard enough as it is. We don't have to like add any additional ailments,
yeah, that's for sure. And most of the time is you sleep great, but then you wake up with the worst headache.
hmm
Yeah. So this next listener question is probably talking about your grip and why does your gun not move in your hands, Charlie?
So why does my gun not move? And it's funny, like when I post Instagram posts, that's probably the number one question that I get on posts, like either direct messages or posts in for the actual post that I put in there. They're like, "Why doesn't your gun move? Are you shooting minor? Or what's the magical spring combination or magical ammo?" And the answer is always you need to grip the gun hard. The more pounds of force we put into the gun, the less it's going to move, right? And the less it moves, the longer your window of opportunity is to call the shot. That's really the advantage of gripping a gun hard and it doesn't displace very much, right? Is it dramatically improves your window of opportunity to call your shot. So you got to grip the gun hard. And we play a game where we need to have aggressive appendages, just like we need to build muscle structure on the muscles that are important. Our grip muscles are important. Our leg quad muscles are important. Those two muscle groups, I really can't say you can't train those enough. Like we're really not going to run into challenges having too strong of legs or too strong of a grip, because the stronger our grip gets, the more pounds of force you have on the gun, while you don't feel like it's a lot of force. Meaning, I can grip the gun firmly, which produces a tremendous amount of pounds of force on the gun, but that allows me to shoot from a more relaxed place, right? Less tense, right?
Mhm. Oh yeah, and especially with double XL large hand size gloves, it makes it very easy to put that pressure on there. Now, for someone like myself, I have large, or someone who has smaller hands, they've got probably put a lot more mental effort into their grip of, focusing on those pressures because their hands are not as large. They have to take up more. They've got to find leverage or manipulate their joints a little bit more because they don't have the natural hand size or something like that, or natural grip strength
Sure,
even.
sure. And part of it is, like, think about it this way. Show me a rock climber that has crappy grip strength.
No, there's none. They don't.
It
They don't.
doesn't exist. They're
Yeah.
going to fall to their death,
Nope.
right? That's the way to think about this. You can't be a rock climber without supreme grip strength. You
Mhm.
can't be a super supreme shooter of pistols without supreme grip strength. It's a requirement.
Mhm.
It's not I can't do it. I just type all day. You know, work out your grip, right?
Yeah.
There's tools to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yep,
got it. Yeah.
exactly. Like,
Now,
I mean, there's if people put more the same amount of effort in all the excuses on why they don't grip their train their grip strength versus just doing it, there'd be a lot more people that had better grip strength.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the side question, I guess, is: do you? I know you probably don't need the liquid chalk, but do you still apply liquid chalk?
I do, because grip pressure is a element of the grip,
Hmm.
right? So there's angles, right? It's, to me, the structure of the angles of your hands on the gun, position of your hands on the gun, that's the primary thing. If our hands are not in the right place or have the right angles, it doesn't matter how many pounds of force to have on the gun, it's not going to work out well, right?
Hmm.
The second element is I need lots of pounds of grip force once I've built that proper structure. The third factor is I want friction on the gun. And friction is, you can get that with putting grip tape on your gun. You could use that chalk style stuff on your hands. Like for me, I like being in Colorado, luckily, like we have very low humidity, right? So I rarely have to deal with sweaty hands or wet hands, right? So I use a combo of grip tape on my gun, and I use chalk on my hands to make sure that I have consistent dryness on my hands. So I have a consistent friction to work with my grip pressure.
Hmm.
That's how I solve the problem. And part of my experience in going to major matches that have high humidity, or maybe it's raining, like you have to have a solution for that, right? You got to have like if I go to matches down south in Florida or whatnot, I'll put fresh grip tape on my guns, and I will not knock it down at all. Like if here in Colorado, I'll put grip tape on, and I'll actually knock down the traction a little bit because I don't need all of that friction. But
Hmm.
when I go to a place where my hands are going to be wet or sweaty, I'll have full grip, um, the grip tape, so it's not knocked down at all. It's super grippy. In that scenario, like as soon as my hand is gripped under the gun, the penalty to that is that I can't adjust my grip, right? Like I lose that malleability of moving my hand around a little bit as I'm bringing the gun up during my draw, right? So I choose, and that's part of the strategy around when I go to these matches where it's wet, my hands are wet. I just tell myself, I don't care how long my draw is. It's going to be slow compared to what I can do in drier conditions. And I accept that. So it's not a distraction to me, right?
Right. Now I'm curious, where on the gun do you put grip tape?
So I put it on the side panels and a front strap. And for like most 2011 style guns, the mainspring housed in the back part of it has checkered. There's some traction there. But from like where my hands actually get hot spots, it's usually front strap, back strap, and then the left panel. That's basically where most of the hot spots are for me on the gun are.
And I'm assuming on your two older, well, on your probably your limited guns and your chaos, they're older grips like a PT grip, or they have the, or did you get the new grips?
So I can't. So all these grips that have the machined in textures that are like super spiky, like they produce a lot of traction, friction, but they're actually so spiky that I cannot grip those guns with my normal grip force because it hurts.
Okay.
Right. So what I do is I get smooth grips and I put grip tape where I need it. And I don't put it everywhere. I just put it where I need it. And grip tape, I can grip it super hard. And the little sand pieces that are in the grip tape, they're not going to hurt my hand, no matter how hard I grip onto the gun, because it feels like I'm just gripping on a smooth surface, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yep. And grip tape is definitely beneficial. It makes your makes polymer guns actually grippy because you can actually like, because on my Glocks for years, like, well, I put this thing, it's essentially stair tread tape that I'd put on the gun because none of the commercially available gun grip tapes would either last or provide enough traction. So you go to something that's going to give you traction.
Yep.
And you might bleed for like a week, but I guess blood gives it character.
Absolutely. It makes it yours.
Right, yeah. And then no one wants it. I mean, and then nobody wants to touch it after you're done with it. Like, you can shoot it if you want. It's kind of like how dogs thing. I pissed on it. It's mine. It's your blood. But we do have a couple more questions, Charlie, before we will wrap this up. But they're good questions. When either you were coming up in the sport or now, who have been some of your biggest mentors to you?
So mentors, I've always been a student of the game from a perspective of I knew early on that if for me to learn, like get spoon fed what I needed to get on the right path, I needed to take training from other people. So I took training from Ron Avery and Manny Bragg and several other, well-known trainers. And for me, I really liked to take components from each one of those trainers because everybody has their own unique style, right? And some people like to mimic other people's styles. I like to kind of like assess and pick pieces out of people's styles and try to augment that into my skill set. And like every year, I try to take a class from another trainer, just so I can see what they're doing, both from how do they train the class and also how do they deploy these skills. And I also like to take classes from trainers that have an opposing style than that I have, because I always like to pull out pieces. Hey, I can take that little piece and integrate it into my style and make my style even better, right? So, from a mentor's perspective, I would absolutely say Ron Avery and Manny Bragg. Those two guys had probably the biggest impact on my starting in this game and getting me on the correct path of how do I tackle this stuff? What's important? What's not important? That kind of situation. So those guys, and honestly, like some of the mentors that I have, like this is all like shooting skill biased, but there's tons of people. And one of the cool things about the practice shooting sports is it's attended by a lot of really cool people, right? Like I learned tons of great stuff from match directors that were killing it as match directors, doing awesome products, learning from them. How do you do it? How do you tackle this stuff? So I hate to say, like, let's just focus on shooters, right? Or trainers from that perspective. I mean, there's stuff to be learned from a lot of different people in practice shooting sports, right? So don't like grow up in a cave and be like, I'm going to figure this stuff out on my own, or I'm just going to watch videos or whatever. Like having that interaction and getting opposing vantage points of what you think things should be is an important cycle of it, right? Like through my tenure of this game, like I've changed how I call my shots probably 10 times, right? And some of it is physical based on how my vision has degraded over time. And some of it is just the process of what am I looking at any given moment, right? And I wouldn't have had an opportunity to figure out some of those nuggets without attending classes from other people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I don't know if it's frustrating to you, but it is to me when someone's like, "Oh, I'm just all self-taught. I'm never going to take a class," but they're really not going anywhere. They're just kind of staying in their own bubble of, they're not really progressing. They're just kind of maybe their raw potential of like athleticism gets them to A class, but then they plateau in A class and they get so discouraged of why they can't make it to M, but they're not willing to learn from someone else.
Yeah, well, I think that a really important skill that you have to have at a certain level, like around that A or M class, you have to come to the grips of, in order to get past that plateau, the only way to do it is to scrap what you're currently doing,
Mm-hmm.
to completely abandon this thing you thought you've had figured out and relearn it from scratch, right? And the reality of it is that once people face that reality of, oh crap, I got to scrap this thing I've put 50,000 rounds and how many hours into to figure out a completely different way of doing it. Nope, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it. Right. And those are the plateau people, right?
Yeah.
That are not willing to abandon a known thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's their choice, right? If they'll get frustrated and eventually they'll maybe come to the light, but you never know. Have you ever thought about having a David and Goliath class with you and Tim Herron?
So I've actually attended a Tim Heron class, and he's an awesome trainer. And I really like his vantage point of the context of how he tackles a lot of the skill sets, right? And like he's a really good example of like the way that he goes about calling shots and first observing iron sights when the gun comes up in front of your face is opposing to what I initially thought it was, like what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's like a very good example of a nugget that I took from him when I took his class. I'm like, hey, there is an alternate way to do this that is in the long run more consistent.
Like you're
Right?
talking, yeah, but you're like talking about like anchoring the rear sight on the target and whatnot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, and it's just stuff like that that maybe the thing that makes you think about a skill differently ultimately isn't the answer, but the time that you put into figuring it out and thinking about it gets you to a new level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more about the journey than the destination.
Absolutely.
It's about like taking the kids on the car ride to Disneyland, but it's all about getting there instead of just, oh, we're here now.
Yep.
It's much more rewarding to be like, oh, let's stop here at this Buc-ee's, or we're gonna stop at this amusement park on the way, and then make it more of a fun trip. It's kind of like our shooting journey.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's a good one. Well, actually, we're to the part where they got to pay. We got to pay the bills. So go ahead and plug your wonderful sponsors here, so they can feel some love.
Yeah, so I'm currently sponsored by Atlas Gunworks. I run their guns and magazines. They work awesome. I don't even know how many rounds through Atlas limited guns, Titans, and Artemis guns. And right now I've switched over to Open, which is their Chaos line of guns. And I actually hope that USPSA goes down the lane of single action only division, whatever that's really going to be, where single action optics, what I'm talking about, where you can run 2011 style guns in a carry optics style division. So hopefully they'll do that. And I think that would be a lot more attended than Open is currently today. So other than that, my sponsors are Long's Shadow holsters. They make all my holsters, really good stuff. I'm one of the few open shooters that runs a Kydex holster. So
They really make an open holster, like an open gun holster.
Yes. So they pressed one just like for my gun, so it's not like a stock model kind of thing.
Okay.
Because all the open guns are like different length comps and red dot mounts and all that kind of stuff. But I've always preferred Kydex holsters just because they're more comfortable. Like I can wear a Kydex holster all day and it's not digging into my leg like a race holster would. And to me, it's like once you have your draw mechanics down, a Kydex holster is no slower than a race holster. And other than that, it's Big Panda Performance, which is my training business. And that's it.
Well, that's awesome. Well, and I'm glad they support you because you wouldn't be able to do it You remember, you got to sell more classes to pay for guns at that point. So it's like,
Absolutely.
at least you can get some help there, and it's awesome. And but yeah, it's awesome that they're helping you. But Charlie, if they want to get a hold of you, if they want to schedule a class, they want to do a consultation, or they want to buy your book, where can they find you and everything there?
So I do all that on my website, bigpandaperformance.com. You can order my book on there, and there's a messaging system on there where you can send me a message and we can wrangle up a class.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're also on Instagram. I mean, you're fairly active there too. Probably Big Panda
Instagram, and I lurk around on the Brian Enos forum here or there. So
yeah. So like all this, guys, if you forget, I won't forget. It's going to be in the show notes. It's going to be on the Instagram post, so you'll be able to find Charlie for sure, or Charlie, as I'm going to have to sign up for every match as. But Charlie, thank you for coming on, dude. It's been a blast. I've learned a lot, and it's been a very good conversation. So, again, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really was. We'll have to do this again sometime. Maybe in 2023 again. We'll hit it again, and where we've come and we've divulged and we've learned. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that will be. And listeners, until next time, get out and do the things, and I will see you on the next one.